Hello and welcome to Choices Global, a production of First Assembly of God, Workmanville, Georgetown, Guyana. On this program, we cultivate and curate conversations pertinent to nation building. Well, today our topic will examine how we can prepare a child for success, framed in the education system, both formal and informal. We have a diverse panel of leaders, or experts, I should say, today, and they are all Guyanese, while some of them reside in the diaspora. Our panelists today are Dr. Marcel Hudson. He is the Chief Education Officer within the Ministry of Education of Guyana. He is an educator for over 30 years, holds a doctoral degree in transformational leadership, and he is the author of the book Born to Succeed. We have with us as well Reverend Winston Asana. He has served at Guyana's premier teachers training college, known as the Cyril Potter College of Education. We call him the educator of educators. He is also the director of the National Youth Ministries Department of the Assemblies of God, a youth leadership and empowerment platform. And he's currently reading for a master's degree in transformational leadership from Baki University. We have Angeli Simone Paruag, an educator with over 20 years of experience in both Guyana and the United States, who also holds a master's degree in education from St. John's University with a specialization in special ed and concentration in mathematics. Mistress Melinda Messiah Duncan is an educator with over 20 years experience working in both Guyana and the US, also with a master's degree in education from the Grand Canyon University, Arizona, with special emphasis on special education. And she's also pursuing an EDH in community care, counseling, marriage, and family therapy. We have our youth panelists, Mr. Martin Messiah, a digital marketing consultant with a global footprint. All of us are Guyanese, and yours truly, Chevon Corbin, sitting here in Geneva, Switzerland. Panelists, welcome to our program today. Today, as we examine how a child can succeed, we want to ground the discussion in a recent UNICEF report, issue 24th of January 2022, where they reported over 616 million children affected by the full or partial closure of schools during the pandemic. They reflected in that report that students will need intensive support to recover lost education, but it goes beyond that. It needs the rebuilding of children's mental health, physical education, social development, and nutrition. These are just a few of the pillars needed for the success, of a child. Dr. Hudson, we want to ask or frame the first question to you. Can you tell us what is the role of the family in the preparation process of a child and securing their success? And what more can we do, reflecting on the Guyana experience?
All right, thank you very much, Siobhan. I think it's an interesting way to start because the first place a child is exposed to with respect to teaching is the family. The family, which is referred to as the basic unit of any society, is the first place where socialization takes place. Socialization is a concept which speaks to teaching and learning. And therefore, if that context is faulty, the child already would have started in a false fashion. And so the role of the family is fundamental to this process. And in biblical times, we saw we saw an exemplary approach in terms of how those roles could really aid in the transformation of a child's performance and success. I think it was David in Proverbs, Solomon in Proverbs 4, who said when he was young and tender and he was his father's only child, he said, my father taught me. And so we saw the importance of parenting, of parents teaching in the context of families. We also saw in Deuteronomy where Moses actually give clear instructions as to how the young people then should treat with knowledge. So that for their own survival, because once you're educated within the context of your culture, it lends to your survival, it lends to your personal success and upliftment. So it is important that families really and truly stick to their tasks, stick to their roles in terms of educating. And because of industrialization, because of the expansion and the growth in societies, we saw, and we'll come to that later, maybe I'll get a chance to talk about the formal education system, because in the context of expansion and growth, the role of the family has somewhat expanded. And because of that, we saw institutions like schools, universities, and other places taking on certain roles. And I think we have to be very mindful, because sometimes we look at these institutions and we refer to them as secular institutions, and therefore we should have nothing to do with those institutions. But we must understand that God is the epitome of knowledge, and no one could really come up with an idea without God allowing certain things to take place. So we want to start indeed with the family. And if you have a good foundation in the family, obviously, even if you go to a school setting and whatever they might be teaching you is contrary to what you would have been taught at home, you could say to yourself what you will believe and what you will not believe, what you will comply with and what you will not comply with. And that is why the family's the role is fundamental to the success of every child, to keep that child on course, not allowing that child to go off course, regardless of what information is coming and from where. If the child is grounded in terms of the teachings of the family, the child would have been in a better position to take off successfully as they pursue education.
Well, Dr. Hudson, I like that point that you highlighted, because during the pandemic, I came across an interesting idea, and the idea that was presented was raise a child that society wouldn't hate, right? And it was shocking because what he was essentially highlighting is that it's important for the family not only to focus on education when it comes to content, but also to look at education from the perspective of socialization too. So I think that when it comes to the family's role in education, it has a big deal. It has a big importance when it comes to the ability of a child not only to learn but to be able to exist and to thrive within that sort of academic environment. And I'll give you a great example of the family's role in education too from Grenada. So I had a friend, and the first time I heard him speak, I realized that I was no longer the best orator in class because he was able to speak, he was able to articulate, and he was able to have a presence. So immediately after the class was done, I went to him and I said, "Yo, bro, this is the first time I'm seeing you here. Let me get off and thing." And then over the next couple of weeks, I realized that the reason why he was able to perform so well at university, the reason why he was able to communicate so effectively, wasn't necessarily because of the school environment he was within, but in his family on Sundays, their family, I think they created a restaurant or something along the beach. But on Sundays and at every opportunity that they got, they would sit at the family table, and this wasn't to eat. This was to debate. And his father would tell him, share this opinion, present from this perspective. You and your brothers, I think you had brothers, y'all talk and y'all present these ideas, and let's figure out who's the better debater. And it was interesting to see how immediately on engaging him within an academic environment, that he was clearly more competitive than many of the other persons there, just because of that foundation that his father, his family, they laid. So that's a great perspective that I hold when it comes to family and education.
And Martin, if I can jump right in there, um, I believe that, and I know for a fact that a child's learning and socialization, and I did write my points down, a child's learning and socialization are and should be influenced by their family, since the family is the primary group. The family is the foundation, the family is the backbone. And I can also say that whatever the children come out and do when they go into the environment, it's an example of what is happening within the home. I believe that as parents, we need to set a holistic view of our learners, our children, set holistic plans for them, not only for them to be academically inclined, but for them also to be well socialized, well cultured, energetic, physically, emotionally, mentally, intellectually. Setting that holistic child, that view of a holistic child, also will make and bring about a positive impact of a learner.
Thank you so very
Angela.
much, Melinda. Um, Families and education cannot be separated. All the educators under the sun would know of the psychologist Liv Vygotsky, who really coined the zone of proximal development. Basically says, or the zone of potential development, which refers to the range of abilities an individual can perform with the guidance of an expert, but cannot yet perform on their own. Now, that basically puts you in three categories. What can I learn on my own? What can I learn with an expert? And what's beyond my reach? Now, in that, before the expert comes in, we have the family, the first set of teachers, the first persons who spoke to that child, the family. So you have a link that started and will continue even to death because we keep our families to death.
Reverend
Well,
Asano,
I
any
guess,
reflections from you?
yeah, I guess what we are highlighting is the value and the importance of the family and the role they play in our educational development. And for some reason or the other, we sometimes, and I'm speaking in general terms, we sometimes lose sight of that importance. The child's first 3 years are so important that almost everything that you learn are really done in those first 3 years. Any other educational work done is building on what was done before, unless it is repair work being done. So sometimes we lose sight that the family is so important in our educational development. I think is either Dr. Hudson or Martin made the observation of the family that placed education high on the agenda produced a child who found it easy to walk through the education corridors. And so we are hoping both for the very rich and the very simple that we all will recognize that there is a role that the family plays in stimulating, incubating that desire, that passion to learn and to grow. Train up a child in the way he should go. When he is old, he will not depart from it.
I would like to circle back on this discussion to also add that one of the predictors of academic outcome is parental education. If I don't know where to take my child or how to get them there, that is also an impact that we don't want for ourselves. So we got to be mindful that that also is it's an adverse effect of the family on the child's learning or academic outcome.
I just wish to add, while that is so, those parents who may not have gone to universities and who may not have had masters and PhDs should not be deterred, because what the research has also shown, and we see that in Ben Carson's book that he wrote, Think Big and Gifted Hands. His mother was an illiterate, but as I think Martin made mention of it, so you don't have to be a university scholar to ask your child to do well. I think sometimes, for example, my father was not a university scholar, he was a carpenter. But he always advocated for the importance of education. And he always said to me, look, I am in this state now, but not because I'm in this state, you will be in this state, or you must be in this state. So learn as much as you can, stay away from bad company, walk on the right hand side of the road. So he spoke to the kind of company I keep. He spoke to my protection in terms of using the road, and he spoke to my education. Ben Carson's mom couldn't read, but she advocated that look, when you all come home from school, I want to see you studying. I want to see you taking time to do your research and reading and so on. Those boys said they did not know their mother could not read until they recognized she was holding a book upside down and pretending to read to them. But look how those boys actually turned out. So we've had parents and so on who have not gone to university, but they could still make an impact. I believe what you're saying, Simone, it is critical because there's a correlation. But I just wanted to put this on the table, not because you've not gone to university and you've not had all these degrees. It means that you cannot make an impact, because you can by simply asking for better performance, even more than where you would have come from or accomplished. Thank you.
Dr.
All right.
Hudson, I want to jump in right there, Dr. Hudson, because as we speak
Uh,
about life stories, my father and mother never went to university, yet still they raised eight children, and almost all of them went off to university at some time or the other. So I believe I come back to the subject of value that is placed on this subject. You must have a certain level of value. Your father still speaks, Dr. Hudson. I wasn't in his presence, but I've heard you talk so many times. Walk on the right hand side of the road. Learn as much as you can and stay away from bad company. As a broadcaster now, every day I tell children when I speak to them exactly what your father said. Walk on the right hand side of the road. Learn as much as you can and stay away from bad company, because it is solid advice that came from a man who valued education. And I come back to the subject of giftedness. Where you think giftedness should first be discovered? Success is really dependent on giftedness. Where you think that is discovered? Where should it be nurtured and cultivated? It is in that enforced environment called the home.
I would like to interject by saying, growing up in our home, I remembered my father, Daddy, used to tell my little brother, I wouldn't call his name, um, that he's not competing with his class. He's not competing with his peers within his class in his school. He's competing with the world. He's competing with the nation. He's competing with the region. He's competing internationally, and therefore that's how he should be studying. Pastor Sana, Reverend Sana, parents, I credit them, the parents who sit and try to learn their child, learn who their child are, the type of learner that their child is. Because we have different kinds of learners, and we tend to say, oh, this child doesn't learn this way, and he's not learning, and he's not learning. But have you sat to think about the child who is probably a kinesthetic learner, or the child who is a visual learner, or an auditory learner? There are different types of learners. And for Dr. Hudson, for the parent who does not know because they have not been down that road, it's okay for them to go and research. It's okay for you to community. This is where the community comes in. This is where the elders in the community comes in. This is where you go to the ministry, the Department of Education, and you teamwork, you link, you network with parents and teachers and others who might know how to get you some help for your type of learner.
Wow, powerful examples, powerful reflections. And if I could throw in my own, I would want to frame it or reflect on the fact that my mom was a small business entrepreneur who had not completed university, but she was adamant that I would not even go to sixth form. I would head straight off to university and I'd have a 2 years advantage on my friends or colleagues who had decided to move on to the A level program, and not at all saying that the A level program was not important, but for what I wanted to do, it was my mom who pushed and motivated me to head off to university. But more than that, what I've recognized that as I operate at the international level in a global financing institution, that the softer skills that they are looking for persons who are people managers, for persons who are stepping into leadership, it's not the technical expertise, but rather the softer side of your skill set, the agility, the ability to communicate. And these are all examples that you guys have been referring to as panelists. And these are the soft skills that you actually develop at home, my ability to solve problems were based on the fact that this is how my mom has always raised me, to focus on solutions and not to be, withering in a corner. And so this is the encouragement that we want to leave with our viewers, that every unit of family has a part to play in the success and the education of a child, because education goes beyond the certificate, the CXC certificate, the bachelor's degree certificate, or even the PhD certificate. But alas, I would want to challenge our panelists to reflect now on the formal education system. Given the importance of the family, how do we see the education system of Guyana and other countries adapting so that we can better prepare the complete individual for the world that is before them? Any one of you can jump in and start.
I would like to say it's a collaborative effort, Siobhan. While the you can't leave the parents out, but at the same time, there must be structured learning. And I believe collaboration between the two is necessary. Dr. Hudson.
Yes, the education, first of all, education is not just, should not just affect the cognitive. We deal with the, if you look at the Bloom's taxonomy, which they've added some more, but we're quite familiar with the cognitive, the affective, and the psychomotor. The psychomotor has to do with the doing, the action, and then the affective domain. That's the domain that deals with the emotional part and the cognitive. And so education should really be delivered in a holistic fashion. So when we talk about education, we should affect the cognitive, the psychomotor, and the affective domain. I think lots of times the affective domain is affected, if I could say that, because this is the part that deals with your value system, how you use your knowledge, your information, how you help people, and so on. And so sometimes people could be very bright, they could be intellectually okay, but when it comes to the whole issue of relationship and dealing with people and the love and care and concern for people, that sometimes is problematic. But as you said, Reverend Sano, for any school to perform, you have to have at least three variables pulling together. Hattie talks about 300 and something variables, he reduced them to 30 something, but there are three specific variables. One, the school has to have a plan for improvement, which is part of the role of the Ministry of Education to ensure that the school has a plan for improvement. The second thing is leadership. Leadership is very important because you can't take people farther than where you have gone. And so strong leadership is very important in the process. And of course, parental support, or the PTAs. Where you see those three things are together, I will show you schools that are performing. So in our context now, we have been concentrating, at least in the context of Guyana, we've been concentrating on leadership because we recognize that we need strong leaders. We have since made contact with UNESCO, a body in France, IIEP, of which I'm a graduate from that institution, that has to do with setting standards in education. So they have been training our people to do what we call school improvement plans. And of course, through the help of UNICEF, we have created what we call parent circles. Now, parent circles, this is where parents receive specific training, specific teaching to help in the teaching learning process, particularly in the interland communities where those communities may have been void of the kind of parental involvement and so on. But you're right, Siobhan. UNESCO, what they've discovered in the UNICEF, the millions of hours that would have been lost, you call that learning loss. And so two things we saw happening: learning loss, which means that you would have been taught a concept, but you forget the concept or forget concepts, and then the loss of instructional time as a result of the pandemic. What we have done in the Ministry of Education, we would have done a number of things. One, we have done what we call Operation Recovery, go to homes and find those children and root them out. Maybe that's a strong term, but to get them out, encourage parents to send them out. And we have found over 500 to somewhere around 700 of them and back to school. A consolidated curriculum, because you have to catch up with the time, because these children need to matriculate, meaning to go on to other institutions of higher learning. So what we have done is prepared a consolidated curriculum with the help of MindBloom, which is a company in the United Kingdom. So that period where lots of gaps existed, we try to consolidate that. It is not the most fantastic thing to capture the learning loss, but it is a great step where you condense or combine concepts in a single period to get that content out to our children so they could move on. We're talking about having excess classes, remedial classes. Of course, some of them are slow learners. They are SEN children. They need special education needs. And so training for our teachers to move in that direction to help those children. Literacy is a big thing. Siobhan, you talked about the book I've written, Born to Succeed. That book actually did exactly what Reverend Sana made mention of with collaboration. We brought parents, teachers, education officers, the wider community together. And so they were trained in specific concepts to go out and reach those children that have been lost. And we have seen great success with that. I think I've spoken. If I get a chance, I'll come back. Somebody could speak. Thanks.
Awesome. A special ed perspective. Melinda, Angeli.
I relinquish to Melinda and then I'll respond.
From the special ed perspective, we have noticed that during the pandemic, because the pandemic was like the largest disruption of learning, the largest disruption of in-person learning, particularly. So what happened is that we have now incorporated what we have as a hybrid learning for some of our students. Those who we recognize that they are not um, doing well during the virtual world. We have them come back into the building, and we still engage our students that way. From the pandemic, I believe we cannot go backwards. We can't say, oh, what happened before the pandemic? It's now moving forward. And moving forward, we have to understand that technology has played or is playing a major role. So, preparing our students to move forward, we have to understand that technology has come in. We're working technology, we're using technology. Children and parents also need to have that grasp of technology in order to be successful in the future. And I do recognize that Dr. Hudson mentioned, we're putting Maslow's theory over Bloom's theory, where we're creating a holistic individual, a holistic student, and not just looking for the hierarchy of learning.
Thanks, Melinda. I'll try to bridge all three questions in one response. Succeeding without college is possible, but a college education really gives us students critical advantage, helping them to succeed. Secondly, I'm a mother of one. She heard me invite two pilots to our last career day. I am not sure of the impact of that, but I know in my home that had a direct impact because she said, Mom, I don't want to go to college. I was like, fine, but you have to have a career. I want to be a pilot. Good. So in her head, she already has what she feels is her work around college. But she has a career. Coming down to that, we have to define what success is. You don't have to have a degree, you don't have to have the formal certificate, but you certainly should be experiencing wins every day. How about if we experience wins every day? Um, Start with organization, keeping a routine, how your procedural process helps you to grow from one step to another. And if you listen to your parents, you'll understand here is a gap. How do I plug it? Coming back to parents, you notice a gap. How do you plug that? What are the steps you're going to take? Are you going to do a schedule for that child? Are you going to do a budget for them? So as long as you set wins for every day, you would be on a sharp and acute trajectory for success, overall success of your child, irrespective of what career or what academic pursuits they are going after.
Martin, any reflections?
Well, I think it was an interesting point that Simone highlighted, where she said wins every day. And I'd like to bring a different perspective to this. Some of the top performers lose a lot, right? And they lose a lot through this learning process. Even when they're at these academic institutions, formal education, sometimes you fail exams. Sometimes you have to go through work, you have to do things over and over again. Sometimes people have to repeat. And within our culture, and we look at that as being, the child not smart, the child dunce, the child this or that. But what we have to realize is that sometimes education or the path to the formal path for advancing through education comes with some interesting twists and turns. So I think it's important to also consider that some of the top performers, if you want to be a top performer, you get used to winning, yes, but the cost to winning sometimes is a lot of losses. And it's about the importance of the family really comes in there, because you now have to be able to manage not only the ups but the downs, right? And many persons, if you want to create something that will go far, sometimes you have to go deep down. So you might have really high highs, but you'll also have very low lows. And once you're within a family that understands not only a pass and fail, but they understand the journey, you would be able to have that kind of foundation that helps you to grow and to continue pushing forward despite your failures. So, like, accept your failures. Yes, they happen. You don't try to fail on purpose, but you do try to explore and you try to grow and you try to move forward. And don't let those failures at these different levels stop you from advancing. And lean on your family. And just a little bit on that one too. Even if your immediate family can be of support to you, lead on that family that you create. Sometimes when you're in this on this educational journey, your biological family might not be the best equipped to help you. However, that family that you create through friendships and relationships and through different organizations, whether it be the church or your sports team or whatever, that support network can help you to achieve.
I'm a strong believer in remedial education. I'm a strong believer in bouncing back. And I have discovered over the years of hard work that some of the persons who really make the mark in life are not really the high flyers, but those same folks who have learned how to bounce back. And so I believe that we must not discard those who seemingly struggle. And at the same time, that same collaborative approach that Dr. Hudson spoke about is necessary. I would add the community, because sometimes mommy and daddy are struggling to find bread and butter, that they really don't have the time to concentrate on any other thing. But with a community approach, if where one fails, the other one backs up. And so I know of communities where persons in that community have looked out for students, identify their giftings. I became a teacher simply because a Seven Days Adventist pastor's wife, who was a teacher, saw me teaching in a school, just holding a job. And she said to me, "You should go and teach, go and get qualified in teaching, because it's a certificate you will need for the rest of your life. You're good." And I'm sure that there are many persons who can testify of that kind of success, somebody on the outside stepping in.
Reverend
Wow.
Tasana, before I had Chevon,
Go
I
ahead.
can testify to that point of being a bounce back. I'm not the brightest in the jar um, in my circle, and Martin is saying yes. And but because of the community that I had, Pastor Sana tried with me, Reverend Sana, when we looking at mathematics. Pastor Sana, remember? And but I was a product. I am a product of a bounce back. My beginning did not determine my end. When I wrote Common Entrance, I probably give it my all. I don't know. I probably give it my all. When I wrote Common Entrance, I attained Richard Ishmael Secondary School. My siblings went to the top schools again. I went to Richard Ishmael Secondary School. But today I'm a product of a bounce back. Not only because of me, but because of my community, because but the community around me, they did not give up on me. So I am a product of that family that didn't give up on their child because they know the child knew of the child's potential, understood where the child's potential, and then the community that came around me to support my trajectory to where I am today.
Well, thank you, Melinda. Thank you, all panelists. What a powerful set of powerful and insightful information that you've given to us. I think as we reflect on the success of a child, you've clearly demonstrated that we need the family, we need parental support and guidance. We need the community, and together they will support the formal education system. Martin, I loved your point about preparing for failure. And Reverend Asana, I had hoped that you would, and you did deliver on, gathering the fact that there is the bounce back effect, and we need to also be prepared for remedial and recovery in our education system. This is all the time we have, and I'm so happy that you guys shared so passionately that we would see our children succeed in Guyana and in every other nation represented by our viewers. As we continue to shape conversations that determine the destiny of our nation, I want to thank our viewers for joining us in this episode. Please keep in touch with us at faogw.org and our YouTube channel, Choices Global. Join us again on June 5th for another episode. I am Siobhan Corbin, your moderator, encouraging you to select a child and mentor and coach them to see them succeed. This is Choices Global.